welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. Today I am going to start with a new series titled Introduction to Sociological Research, or we can call it as Sociological Research Method. In today's lecture, we are going to discuss about objectivity and subjectivity in sociology, especially because it's a science of society. So as a discipline which it started, evolved, the contributing founding fathers felt that it should be a science of the society, and therefore the argument that sociology should be value free. So a lot of sociologists were in support of the idea that there was no space for objective biased opinion in sociology, and that researchers should do away with their personal opinion, personal biases, or even in terms of their supportive argument. Now we are going to today try to understand that is value free sociology possible, and therefore we are going to refer to a specific argument which are going to support value free sociology and arguments which are going to go against the idea of a value free sociology. So let's start and try to understand, is sociology value free? So to ensure the development of sociology as a scientific discipline, many proponents supported the claim for value neutrality. They argued that sociologists should only focus on facts and avoid letting their personal beliefs, ethics, or political view influence the research and conclusion. And therefore, we know that Emil Durkheim, in his book, The Rules of Sociological Method, argued that we need to study society with aspect of social fact, and therefore he gave certain concrete ways in which we could study society. Proponents like George Lundberg argued that this makes sociology as objective and universally useful as natural sciences like physics. So it would be valuable and under any political system, even fascist or communist. David J. Gray, in his article Value Free Sociology, a Doctrine of Hypocrisy and Irresponsibility, argues that the pursuit of value free sociology is deceptive and ultimately irresponsible approach to the field. Now in today's lecture, we are going to focus on the argument made by David J. Gray in his article. Now this article is a subscribed reading for the course on sociological research method, which is prescribed in most of the undergraduate sociology syllabus. We are going to understand why David Gray is critiquing the idea of a value free sociology. He will kind of look into the arguments that support the claim and also kind of argue in terms of the disadvantage to the discipline that value free sociology would do. Now according to Gray, objectivity in social science is a myth, and sociologists cannot and should not attempt to divorce their research from their own values. Sociologists should acknowledge and critically analyze the values that shape their research rather than pretending to be value free. And why is he saying so? Because as human beings, we all have certain values, we have certain support certain systems, support certain political thought, and therefore to assume that our research is not going to be affected by a value is or any kind of subjective value is kind of not feasible. So the argument that David Gray is making is that this dominant idea of value free sociology is not kind of something which is redundant or that we can throw away. Rather, it has been kind of there in the discourse or in the discipline, but the manner in which it has been used has become a little problematic. So this dominant view of value free sociology is unhelpful according to David J. Gray. While this argument might seem radical, the author acknowledges that it's not entirely new. That is, a lot of rejection of value-free sociology has been integral to the discipline over the period through which the discipline evolved. So, for decades, a minority of sociologists have criticized the discipline's attempt to be ethically neutral. It has been raised by several prominent figures, includes Zenek, Link, Redfield, Biersted, Sorokin, Goldner, Nisbet, Mills, Steen, and Horowitz. However, the desire within sociology to be seen as scientific, often narrowly defined as being quantitatively precise, has been so strong that has largely overshadowed these criticisms. So, if we go back to some of the initial lectures in basic sociology where we talk about the evolution of the discipline as sociology, and we know that Auguste Comte kind of wanted it to be completely similar to the physical science, and therefore the attempt was to study society in a scientific manner, and the scientific in the sense that it could be measured, it could be quantified. Now, over a period of time, a number of sociologists rejected this claim of objectivity in social sciences, and one of the main kind of proponent of in sociology to kind of oppose the idea of value-free sociology is Alvin Goldner. The challenge to the idea of value-free sociology haven't been seriously addressed or debunked. Instead, they have mostly been brushed aside or overlooked in academic discussion. Sociologists like Alvin Goldner pointed out that across the discipline, from thinkers like Talcott Parson to George Lundberg, there has been a kind of unspoken rule, a shared norm that sociologists should avoid making value judgment. Goldner sarcastically calls this a dogma or a commandment, thou shalt not commit a value judgment, as if it's a kind of a rule to be followed by all sociologists that you cannot kind of bring in your value, you cannot let your research be affected by your personal values. Now, this critique implies that sociologists, regardless of their theoretical perspective, often operate under these common assumptions, treating it almost like a moral rule or a religious principle. So, whether it is kind of even possible, people kind of go against this statement that it has to be value free. It is kind of absence of all judgment. Over time, this commandment has morphed into a belief, that is, many sociologists now genuinely think they don't make value judgments at all. So, it's been kind of internalized in the sense that the research done by a sociologist is absent of all value judgment. Now, this claim of objectivity was strategic. And what does this mean? This means the attempt was to make sociology seem like a hard science. Now, hard science in the kind of, it was being compared to the physical science like chemistry or physics, where you had kind of evidence to prove the findings of your, and therefore it was kind of no personal value judgment of a scientist could affect the findings, and therefore facts and evidence became central to the research in sociology. Now, many sociologists appear to internalize that claim, believing in their own neutrality, not realizing that they do in fact make value judgment, often implicitly. By repeating the claim of objectivity so often, sociologists have come to believe it's true. This is a classic critique of ideology. What starts as rhetoric becomes self-deception. Saying we are objective enough time convinces not just the audience, but the speaker themselves. So, whether the research is value free or not, the researcher or the sociologist in this case are making this claim loud and bold that their research is value free. Now, why is this kind of being questioned or being critiqued is that as sociologists, we as human beings are studying human behavior, and we are not kind of doing any kind of experiment on a third subject. It is on your own life, on your own behavior, and therefore to assume that value is not a part of the research is basically an illusion, as argued by David J. Gray. He argues that value neutrality in sociology is an illusion, as the idea that sociology can be value free has not been genuinely disproved, is just been ignored. Sociologists over time internalized a belief in their own objectivity. This belief has less to do with actual objectivity and more to do with reputation and professional habit. It's a call to self-awareness, urging sociologists to recognize and examine their own assumption, values, and the ideological forces shaping their work. And the whole idea is to understand that can sociology as a discipline studying your own society be value free, and therefore this idea of value free sociology kind of is treated as a myth. And we need to kind of understand that David Gray is also challenging the myth of value free sociologies by making three key points. Number one, values have always been present. It's simply not true that sociology has been free of values. Despite the repeated claims of objectivity, values have been embedded in sociological work all along, whether consciously or not. So, the argument is that there has been the presence of value. The sociologists were not kind of ready to take that there isn't. So, they go out and point out that sociology is value free, where on the other side, when we look into the works of these founding fathers, we see that value has been integral in their work. Number two, highly regarded works contain value judgment. In fact, the sociological works that are considered the most important and influential, that is also called as the classical or major contribution, especially here when we talk about the classical, we are talking about the founding fathers, mainly Weber, Max Weber, Emil Durkheim, Karl Marx, Talcott Parsons. So, these are the kind of more important work in sociology or major contributions, and their work are having evidence of implicit judgments about human values. This contradicts the idea that neutrality or objectivity is what makes sociology strong. Instead, value judgment often play a key role in making sociological insight powerful and meaningful. The third challenge to the myth of value-free sociology is that the power of sociology lies because values are involved. So, the entire significance of the discipline as a science of society is that we are dealing as sociologists, we are dealing with values, we are dealing with human values, norms, behavior and culture. So, it is if we kind of do away with these, then the existence of the discipline is in question. So, the emotional and intellectual force of great sociological work often comes from its value judgment. It's concerned with justice, freedom, inequality, human dignity, etc. Rather than weaken the discipline, value commitments give sociology its edge, its relevance, and its ability to challenge the status quo. Now, David J. Gray in his article talks about how value was integral in the works of Max Weber and Emil Durkheim. First, he discusses the values in Max Weber work. So, Max Weber famously argued that sociology should distinguish between statement of fact, that is what is, and judgment of value, what ought to be. Despite this commitment, the author points out that Weber himself made strong value judgment, particularly in the classical work, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. Weber's portrayal of modern capitalist society ends up with a deeply critical reflection: specialist without spirit, sensualist without heart. This nullity imagines that it is attained a level of civilization never before achieved. So, Weber immediately admits that he is entering the realm of value judgment. So, he is acknowledging that in his work, and so which is now considered as a classical work, the value judgment is integral. But this brings us to the world of judgment of value and faith. This is his own acknowledgement of how value judgment was included in his work. Still, the author emphasizes that value judgment were made in the classical work. And more importantly, the work impact would be diminished without it. So, this undercuts the idea that sociology could be or can be entirely value free. Now, next, David Gray looks into the work of Durkheim, Emil Durkheim, and the implicit presence of value judgment. The author turns to Durkheim, who thought commitment to empirical sociology also worked from a moral concern about the disintegration of social solidarity. So, if we kind of again go back to the lectures in basic sociology and look into the work of Emil Durkheim, his main concern about the decline of collectiveness, or he was kind of looking into the moral order where the solidarity was changing from organic to mechanical, and therefore can we then kind of say that this is absent of value, because collectivity, your integration into the society are all connected with the moral values of a society. So, Durkheim's description of modernity as destroying older social form expresses a clear concern for social cohesion and meaning, again value laden concepts. Durkheim's classical work on suicide ends not with cold statistics, but with questions like, is the evil, that is suicide, then incurable? Next, the statement from Durkheim's work is, by what means shall we try to overcome? See, he was not interested in giving us statistics about suicide or why the numbers in suicide was increasing. Rather, he was going into the moral order of the society, which in a way was responsible for alienation from the society, and therefore the qualitative understanding of social phenomena. Now, we kind of look into the idea that in both Weber and Durkheim, they are not neutral detached observation. They are calls to action rooted to concern for human well-being. The author via Goldner notes an irony in Weber's work. Weber aimed to depoliticize the German university system to protect academic work from political interference. But in doing so, he accidentally helped strip sociology of its moral core, amoralizing it. Even the most celebrated and objective sociologists made strong value judgments. Their work is powerful precisely because it engages with moral and ethical concern. Now, if we look into the work of Max Weber and Emil Durkheim, we see there are certain commonalities, or there are certain basic qualities that we find in both the work. Number one, both studied the fundamental forces shaping social life. So, Weber was studying how your culture could be affected by religious values, and Durkheim was kind of looking into the growth of industries and the change in the working patterns, which was kind of creating a rift in the social values integration of individual into the society. So, both were trying to look for an empirical sociology. They were trying to seek objectivity, but did not shy away from making reasoned value judgment when interpreting their results. This sets the stage for a broad critique of the myth of neutrality in sociology. Now, we have, after looking into the work of Weber and Emile Durkheim, there could be a question that these were the founding fathers' work, and then sociology kind of shifted and value free could have become possible. So, David Gray gives us examples from more scholars who had value judgment in their work. So, to challenge those who might claim that Weber and Durkheim are exceptions, the author presents a long list of foundational sociologists, all of whom made value-laden contribution. To begin with, Auguste Comte. He advocated for sociocracy, a value-based vision of social order. Next, Ferdinand Tönnies preferred Gemeinschaft, which is a term for community, over Gesellschaft, which is society, with a clear emotional tone. So, in his evolutionary theory of social change, he made a distinction between the society and the community, and yet in his reading of the text, there was a preference towards the community over society. So, even when we look into most of the evolutionary theory of social change, we see that the community was kind of considered in a positive line, and its shift from community to the society is critique. It's considered as a downfall. So, there is a value to, or there is a preference for a particular kind of community. The second example is Charles Cooley. He described primary relationship as warm and intimate versus secondary one as cold and impersonal, a clear evaluation contrast. Thorstein Veblen critiqued conspicuous consumption as wasteful, rooted in utilitarian values. Sigmund Freud, in his book Civilization and Discontent, implies in its very title a critical moral judgment. All of these thinkers are considered foundational or significant, not in spite of their value judgment, but because of them. Who would really prefer that their works altered to conform to the dictates of a true value-free sociology? So, we know that there are these questions that why does value neutrality consist, even if it is kind of critiqued or it is kind of not advantageous to the discipline? And the answer is that sociology cannot exist without the presence of value, and value-free sociology is kind of only an illusion and not possible. So, it's not kind of doing away with it, it has its own importance. Yet it is important to keep in mind that we have to adhere to value-free model, and strict adherence to such a value-free sociology would lead to a morally bankrupt science that serves any master, no matter how tyrannical or inhuman, because it explicitly divorces itself from ethical consideration. So, with this idea that value judgments is significant to the discipline of sociology, we need to read David J. Grake's article on value-free sociology. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.